There are lots of opinions out there about the right to work legislation. Here on New Mexico in Focus, we invite members from the community to join us each week to share their reactions, thoughts, and opinions on top stories and news this week. Now, I'm joined at the table today by Laura Sanchez-Reve from Sanchez Legal Solutions, Rob Nicoleski, he's from watchdog.org. Merritt Allen is back. She's executive director of Vox Optima. And Dee Dee Feldman, former state senator and author and recent birthday gal. Oh. That's right. That's right. Happy birthday. Look, we just heard from two sides of the debate. Carter, I want to ask you something where Carter Bundy is coming from. Talk about a wage gap in states that have right to work versus strong unions. He cited a number about $1,500 in there. There's a lot of facts and figures floating around about right to work, whether it works or it doesn't work. Have we settled the issue in New Mexico with this vote now that the bill's not going to pass?
Oh, no, that'll never be settled.
Okay.
Only thing, and it's a war of statistics. But
yeah.
One thing that, I find very convincing is that those states that do have right to work now, not known as the most economically progressive, Mississippi, Alabama, 8 out of the 10 poorest states in the country are right to work states, which is diametrically opposed to what the proponents will tell you.
Right.
So
right.
This is not settled. It's a wedge issue. It'll keep being coming up and up again. I thought it was settled 20 years ago, and we've spent so much time on it this session. The outcome was preordained anyway,
yeah.
And I wish we had been doing more productive things.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of folks were talking about that too. Rob, interesting. Talking about both sides, Dennis Rosch and Carter Bundy in that segment. The idea of the poll. That, again, most New Mexicans supported the idea of right to work, and Carter's response was the wording was flawed. Do you know what I mean? Where do we actually sit on right to work? This is my frustration. I don't think we actually do know statewide how
I'm
people
not
feel
sure
about
because
this.
Brian Sanderoff conducted that poll for the Journal, and he's a pretty well-respected guy who's not considered right or left.
Sure.
I think that most of the statistics and polls come out that people are in favor of right to work. I agree with Senator Feldman in the sense that this is a battle of statistics because, yes, some of those states that are right to work are the poorer states, but also, on the other hand, a lot of the states like Texas, like Idaho, are right to work, and they're growing. New Mexico has not. So this is going to go back and forth. I was not surprised at what happened this year. There was a little bit of thought that maybe that the Republicans in the Senate would be able to blast the bill.
Right.
And have it go straight and skip the committee process and have it go right to the floor. And I talked to a statewide Democrat who used to be in the legislature, who told me before that the legislative session began that he thought that it would pass, that if it got to the Senate floor. I'm not sure if it would have, because Phil Griego told me flat out right before the session started that he wouldn't vote for it.
Right.
And he would have needed at least four Democrats to flip. But since they didn't blast it out of committee, it's dead, and unless something incredibly dramatic happens the next week, it's not going to.
That's a good point. Merritt, the idea that if in fact right to work creates jobs, I would think that's a pretty compelling case. You could find Democrats who would vote for this. Was that case just not made credibly for Democrats?
I feel like this was right to work light, this legislation. First of all, let's throw a minimum wage increase on there as a pat and get people, and then force you to vote against the minimum wage increase. Ha 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 ha, good emotional blackmail. Then you talk about money in politics. You've got the payday lenders and who had donated huge to the folks who voted against that bill. Well, this right to work bill did not cover AFSCME, NEA, or AFT members. And those are by far the largest contributors in the state on unions. So I felt this was, frankly, a very light test bill to see how it would go, because the 13,000 people who are not members of unions in union shops, that's not a large number of our workforce. And I don't think, based on those numbers, that's going to keep Tesla or those other folks out.
Right.
It's the whole climate. And so I just didn't, I felt the bill was rather weak. The outcome was not surprising to me.
Yeah. Laura, let's talk about unions. Is this, at the end of the day, probably could be a boon for unions here? Sometimes you got to be in a good fight.
Right.
You got to fight for your existence. You got to fight for your very survival, and that wakes people up. Is this a good thing at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that this issue is always, I agree with the senator, this is always going to be an issue. I think there are arguments on both sides, And I think, it's a pendulum, and it's been that way throughout history. If you look at the progression of unions, there's been a pendulum that swung one way or the other, and that's created a lot of our federal legislation as well. I think that in this particular issue, and there were several unions that were exempt, but what bothers me about this discussion, especially the Roche interview that we just saw, there's a lot of talk about protections for workers and how people who, they shouldn't be required to pay. Nobody requires union membership, first of all. And I think that's something that's been really not clear to, not having looked at Brian Sanderoff's poll, I'm not sure what the wording was on that, but nobody is being forced to be in a union, first of all. And secondly, what's important about worker protections that people need to understand is that the unions have a duty of fair representation. So provided that any worker is in a bargaining unit, meaning that they work in a unit that's covered by a collective bargaining agreement, then they also get the benefits that a union member gets. They get the same kind of defense and grievance procedures, and the union is bound by law to actually represent them in a grievance that they may have, regardless of whether they're actually an active union member. They're in that bargaining unit.
Is that part of that idea of fair share? Do you know what I mean? If you're not paying in, but you still get the protections, that's the fair share.
Well, that's a huge part of the way it's worked. It's definitely, and I think for a lot of workers, especially throughout state government, I've had some experience in state government actually representing the state side. But, you see this all the time where workers don't have any recourse. They can't afford an attorney, a private attorney, but the union is available for representation, both with reps and with attorneys, and that's a huge benefit in workplace situations.
I can imagine, yeah.
I find this whole discussion tremendously frustrating because basically it's built on an old business model of manufacturers and employers versus union. The real job creating industry now in Texas, and you mentioned Texas and elsewhere, these are not large manufacturing companies. These are small businesses. These are information economy type entrepreneurs that maybe have 20, 30 people in their shop. And frankly, I don't think that this right to work debate has anything to do with that.
Interesting. Rob,
Well,
last word.
the biggest growth in unions has been in public sector unions. Because the manufacturing base in this country, has diminished. I think there's that right to work. What it fundamentally comes down to is if someone's in a union and they don't like the fact that their union dues are being paid often for political purposes that they might disagree with, and they want to have that choice.
But there's the idea, Rob, the right to not have to participate in something. Isn't there a right to just walk away from the gig if it's that heinous? Just don't take the job. Just do something else.
Be unemployed?
Well, there's other things to do, right? I mean, if union employment is such a bad thing, I don't get what the argument is at the end of the day.
Well,
for individual rights.
You're almost arguing that if you don't join it, then you're just tough luck. Then then go find another line of work.
What would you make of that? What would you make of that?
I do think that there's an element of choice involved in that. If somebody really feels strongly that their participation or their the collective bargaining agreement, the union that represents that unit, is making political decisions they don't agree with. Philosophically, you can understand that, but there is some choice in being able to get a different job that is not covered under a collective bargaining agreement. One thing that I will bring up, to Rob's point about union dues being used for political purposes, a lot of places that actually have collective bargaining units, and I'm not talking about AFSCME or the public sector per se, but in the private sector, let's take for instance, a company like PNM. They could have, unionized electrical workers and so forth. The company itself that they work for is also making contributions on the other side to a number of different candidates.
Sure.
You can follow the money in both sides, and that's
Not the
part
employees'
of.
paychecks.
Well, yeah, but they're
But
actually
with
making
the
decisions with shareholders' money.
The shareholders'
and it's a
money, and they
balance
don't have a
between employee workers and
say.
shareholder amount that's being collected for that. So you're still. There's money in politics on all levels, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to get away from that. You can see it on both sides.
Right. I misspoke with the last word to Rob previously. My fault. Merritt, take us out of this one with the idea that, where does it go from here? The senator has said, look, it's going to come up again. You have mentioned it's possibly going to come back in a more robust form. Is that what you were hinting at last time?
I don't know that I can, because I think what the senator just said about the union, the labor management construct, is outdated. And I think we need to focus less on skilled trades. Hey, we all need plumbers and electricians. Those folks are working. Retail, hospitality, where folks can't get 40-hour weeks. Those folks have no voice. So I feel like organized labor needs to also be kind of shifting their focus, not just on state legislation, but the economy and where people are working and where people are underemployed, which is the point of a union.
That's a good point there. Up next, we hear from Education Secretary Hannah Skandera.